There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the October 13th, 2014 meeting of the City of Fayetteville Planning Commission. If you will, take this opportunity to please silence your cell phones. Mr. Garner, would you please call the roll?
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser, Honchel,
Here.
Cook,
Present.
Winston,
Yes, here.
Bunch,
Here.
Noble,
Here.
Selby,
Here.
Autry.
Here.
Okay. All right. First item of business is the consent agenda. We have one item, or the item of the consent agenda. The first item is approval of the minutes of the September 22nd, 2014 meeting. Vacation 14-4849, vacation 14-4853, lot split variance, I guess it is, 14-4857, concurrent plat 14-4831, and that's it.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Cook?
if there's no other comments, I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda as read.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Cook and a second by Commissioner Selby. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins.
Yes.
Honchel,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble.
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Our first item of new business, number 6, variance 14-4869, submitted by Engineering Services Incorporated for property located at lots 18 through 30 Spyglass Hill Drive. The properties are zoned RSF4, residential single-family 4 units per acre, and contain approximately 5 acres. The request is a variance from of the streamside protection requirements. And Mr. Pugh.
I guess first and foremost, Commission, we have had a request from the client to table a portion of this request. You may or may not be aware there are 3 different owners that own these lots. The owners of lots 18 and 20 through 29 have requested that their portion of the request be tabled so that they could have some additional time to review staff recommendations. However, the owner of lots 19 and 30, if the Commission is acceptable, would like to go ahead and hear their variance this evening.
Okay. Mr. Garner, I don't know how we can we take one item and table part of it?
I think you can. I think we'll have Mr. Pugh give the staff report, and we have on the record only 2 lots would be requested to be voted on tonight, lots 19 and 30. And so we can zoom in on those lots and just keep the discussion to those lots, and then we would need a motion to table all of the other lots and a motion to either approve or deny or table. It'd be just 2 separate motions. I think
Okay.
that'd be fine.
I don't know that I've ever experienced one of these. Okay, all right. Okay, Mr. Pugh, if you would, remind us again.
That being
You
said,
said lots 18 and 29,
18 and 20 through 29.
20 through 29, okay?
The only lots that are being proposed at this point to be heard this evening would be lots 19 and lots 30.
Okay, lots 19 and 30. Well, I guess, if you will, give us a staff report on lots 19 and 30.
Sure, and the staff report would obviously be very similar for all of those, but we have a situation out here where Phase 5 in Stonebridge Meadows along Spyglass Hill was platted before the streamside ordinance protection ordinance went into place. Given the configuration of those lots and the depth of those lots, the streamside protection ordinance zones would make them virtually unbuildable. For that reason, the owners have sought some relief from the streamside protection ordinance. You can see a little bit more detailed discussion in the staff report, and I'll be happy to go into more of that if you would like. Basically, staff would recommend the variance under a few conditions. Number 1, the minimum disturbed buffer area of 25 feet in width shall be maintained as measured from the top of bank defined on the attached exhibit. Permanent signage to be placed at the rear of each lot identifying the extents of the streamside protection zone. The current owner shall disclose to any potential buyer of any lots or homes affected that the lot or home is subject to the streamside ordinance. And the developer shall propose to use best management practices during the construction process to limit runoff. And developers shall include with each constructed lot a low-impact development feature to treat the runoff from any impervious surface, such as a bioswale or rain garden.
Just for clarity's sake, could you I cannot see it on this iPad. Can you identify the two lots we're talking about, 19 and 30?
Yeah, so lot 19 is here on the northern end. This is lot 19. You can see that. It's the second to last one on the end on this side, and then lot 30 is all the way down at this other end, the very southernmost lot.
Okay?
And for Commission's knowledge as well, the hatched area that you see along Spyglass Hill would be the buildable area if the entire streamside protection zone were enforced on these particular lots. So you can see as well in that exhibit that would leave a very small, virtually unbuildable area for a single-family home. So on most of the lots, I believe one or two of the corner lots, they might be able to build something, but it would be extremely difficult, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this item? If you will, please step up and state your name and anything you might want to add to it, comments. If you will, keep it as brief as you can.
I will. My name is J.R. Carroll. I'm with Kutak Rock. I'm here on behalf of the property owner. The reason why we've asked to be heard tonight as opposed to the other property owners is my client was already approved, the building permitted, went through the process, and already actually started building homes. And if I may approach, I've only got 2 of these.
If you will, give it to
Andrew gets it.
Thank you, sir.
What this will show you is the houses as they're being built now, before there was a stop order, with the planning department's recommendations. As far as lot 30, this is the one that's in the far corner right here that you can see. With the recommendations, we can do all those. We can do everything that the planning department recommends that we do. And so, you know, we stand by the planning department and with regard to lot 30 and state that we'll be more than happy to do all the recommendations for the planning department. Now, as far as lot 19, if you could scroll over to lot 19, given how it angles toward the front, what happened with lot 19 and what's raised these issues is basically my client was approved to build on this lot, and the property owner, because both of these lots are custom homes, these are not spec homes, the owner's already put down earnest money, you know, they're waiting for it to be built so that they can move in. The property owner actually asked for the house to be moved 5 feet farther away from the stream. And when my client considered that a material change, so he brought it into the city as stating that, you know, this is not what the city approved. The city approved it being closer to the stream. And so when he brought it in to say, I'm moving it farther away from the stream, that's when it triggered it being recognized that all of these lots are going to be within the preservation ordinance. But given the way that this lot 19 angles in toward the front of the street, it is simply not possible. This lot is over half an acre, but given the streamside ordinance and the setbacks, the buildable area is very small. So what we'd request for lot 19 is lot 30, everything that the planning department requests, but with regard to lot 19, instead of it being 25 feet, being a 25 and a 12 and a half foot buffer, and we would be able to put the house on that property per the homeowner's request. And I'll take any questions if y'all have any.
Thank you,
Sir,
sir.
could you please state your name again for the record?
J.R. Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you.
Okay, now if any member of the audience would like to speak to this, please step forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it to the commission. Commissioners.
That's a question, Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
I guess for the attorney, since we knew this would come up, because I know that's why we have the variance added in this ordinance, but obviously we can't deny them the ability to build something on their lot, correct? I mean, it's,
Well, you actually have two options. They already have a building permit, the way I understand it, and the right to build 5 feet closer to the stream than where they even want to be. But if their variance was denied, then they still have the existing building permit, and they could go ahead and build it right where it states right now. And so I would think that granting a variance will move it away from the stream, which is, of course, the whole goal on the streamside preservation ordinance. So, you know, I would think that it would probably be a very wise move for the Planning Commission to grant Mr. Carroll's request here so that the house will be farther away from the stream than where they have the right to build it right now.
Okay, and in no way am I suggesting we deny the right to build, don't get me wrong, I was just asking that question, because when this ordinance was passed, we knew we would have a few of these situations come up, so, okay, that was my only question.
And you were right in your second part, too. Obviously, we don't want to make lots that are totally unbuildable, because that could have dire financial consequences for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Well, I guess I'm going to ask a few questions. Mr. Carroll? Yes. On this map that you've given us,
Yes.
it shows the footprint of a house,
Yes.
okay? And I guess I'm a little bit confused. Why would you want to move a building 5 feet that's already been footprinted?
No, it was footprinted, basically, that one's already staked out 5 feet ahead of, before it got staked, the homeowner came out and said, I would like to be 5 feet farther away from, and so what we did was, we turned in the plans, we staked it out, we haven't poured any concrete, done anything like that of any material consequence.
Okay.
Now, on lot 30, I believe that it was further along in the process, but it also follows the guidelines of the planning department.
Okay. This, I guess, for Alan, I guess. They have a very, very small building envelope, okay? And I guess the way it stands now, if they build the house, basically, they're not gonna have any backyard to these houses, because all that has to be left natural, correct?
They would not have on some of those lots in the middle very much or any backyard, yes, sir.
Okay. And of course, anybody that you sell a house to probably,
Now, I'll preface that by saying they'll have a yard, it may not be a manicured lawn like,
yeah, thank
as
you
would
for
be a
correcting.
typical-
That's actually where I was going, was a manicured lawn. And my guess is we're gonna have a difficult time, you know, people, when they buy houses, they put lawns in, so you may not be violating it today, but very likely it might get violated tomorrow, so. And I guess my question is these lots surround a lake, a man-made lake?
They do, for
Okay.
lack of a better term, it is a small lake.
And so I guess our streamside protection ordinance is becoming a lakeside protection ordinance?
And the ordinance does identify some water bodies, I think Lake Fayetteville specifically is identified, and some other things beyond just what we would see a natural stream. That's really defined by the headwaters, and anything basically downstream of that first 100 acres of headwater is then protected, so.
Okay, all right. I guess my thoughts are, this lake is dammed up at the north end, and so, and it's been there for some time, and sediments and what have you that would be coming off the adjacent properties or whatever are gonna get caught in that lake. And so, I don't see a real danger of them getting into beyond the dam and down to downstream areas or what have you. And I know the intent of the ordinance is to protect the waters, and I'm all for that, but it seems to me in this case, especially since we can't find where the original stream was, and knowing that people are going to come back through odds are wanting manicured lawns, and I'd hate to be the yard police that's to go out there and say, nope, you can't do that. I think in this case, a much more limited protection zone is in order, considering the lake or what have you, and considering you've got the buffer of the dam. It's all managed by the POA, I assume,
Yes,
cleaned by the POA if necessary,
yes,
et
Commissioner
cetera.
Hoskins.
And so, again, as a just kind of a common sense thing, I think a much smaller buffer, even beyond what they're asking for, knowing what's going to happen in the future, might be appropriate.
And I don't disagree with some of that. Obviously, there are things beyond sediments that we're concerned about, some nutrients and other things, phosphorus and nitrogen for one. They're typically associated with manicured lawns and fertilizers and things like that.
Right.
Some buffer zone would help prevent those from entering the stream if we have a vegetative buffer. That's part of the reason for the recommendation for LID features to be included in each one of the lots. As we kind of talked about during agenda session, if it was to need to be cleaned out at some point in the future, we're kind of going through those pains now with Lake Sequoia. That would be very labor intensive and very expensive. Obviously, if the applicant is willing to take that on, that would be their responsibility, so.
Doesn't that lake itself provide for a LID feature?
Absolutely, to a certain degree, I think it would. Sediment removal in particular, it would be very effective at that. Obviously, any lake, any pond, anywhere, regardless of upstream development, will silt in over time. The development in itself kind of dictates how quickly that will happen, so.
Right. Okay, so Clay, I want you to, if you will, remind us, the typical buffer required is what, and the variance they're asking for, the buffer will be what?
In this particular instance, the waterside zone would be 45 feet in width. The management zone would be 25 feet in width. So it would be a total of 70 feet in width for streamside protection zones. Staff has recommended to go back to the initial 25 feet that would be otherwise required of a development if 15% slopes did not come into play. In this particular instance, we have some steep slopes adjacent to the stream, which brings a little bit of additional buffer required by the ordinance into the waterside zone.
Okay. Okay, so it's hard for me to read this. Okay. So basically, we're looking for a 25-foot?
That was staff's recommendation, yes, sir.
Okay. And can you show me where that is on that map?
The 45-foot is the second, I guess, as you're moving away from the stream itself, the first kind of light hashed line is the top of bank that was defined by the applicant. The second one that Andrew is pointing out is the 45-foot buffer, and then the third one would be the total 70-foot buffer. I don't believe there's one in particular that shows the 25-foot offset. We did get an email later from the applicant that showed the 25-foot offset and how it related to those homes, which may be what you was passed out this evening.
Okay. So the line closest to the water, the body of water, represents
The top of bank.
top of bank. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Like I say, the other commissioners, of course, I'd like to hear their opinion or whatever, but, I mean, I'm on favor of a 5 or 10-foot zone, considering the lake itself is an LID feature. People are going to want to have groomed yards, and they're likely going to, whether they understand that buffer zone is there or not. And I believe that's plenty for this, and plus the protection of the dam of the lake itself, so.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff. Is the variance for moving the house on Lot 19 forward 5 feet, that's a simple setback variance?
They're not proposing a setback variance, they're proposing just a stream side variance for the home to be closer to the stream than is allowed.
I think they're asking for it to be moved 5 feet away from the stream.
And that's,
Still within the
yeah,
setbacks.
that's not a consideration by the Board of Adjustment. That would be a zoning variance if they're would want to go into the building setback. That would be moving the house closer to the street. So I don't believe that's being
Isn't that
proposed.
what they want to do?
I mean,
I think y'all are both correct. I think what started all this was, when they filed paperwork to have it moved 5 feet closer, and once 5 feet closer to the street, away from the stream, but when that paperwork was filed, then then they realized that all the lots were inside the preservation ordinance. And so basically, yes, we're asking for the house to be moved 5 feet farther away, but we're also asking for a reduction in that buffer zone.
Okay. But as far as moving the house 5 feet farther away from the stream, is that a planning commission or a Board of Adjustments issue?
Yeah,
Neither.
yeah, they're not proposing to go into any building setback. They're not
Okay,
going
so we
anywhere,
know-
no.
So it's a planning commission issue.
Yeah, it's just they're just.
Well, the stream side is always controlled by the planning commission, not the Board of Adjustment.
But not the,
What I'm asking about is moving the house 5 feet closer to the street. Is that a planning commission issue?
It wasn't violating any of the setbacks.
Yeah, they have plenty of room to go even closer. At least the setback is only 15 feet, and their homes are set back beyond 25 feet beyond the setback. So they have more than enough room to move it closer if they wanted to.
So really, it's a non-issue for us?
Right.
Gotcha. Great, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that variance for lots 19 and 30, variance 14-4869, be recommended for approval.
Second.
She didn't let me, okay.
Could we clarify on the motion exactly, are you recommend, is the motion include the conditions recommended by staff with the 25-foot buffer, or are you wanting to approve the variances as requested by the applicant to go even closer to the?
As requested by the applicant.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Autry and a second by Commissioner Cook. Okay. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins,
Yes.
Ponchel,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
No,
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, next item on the agenda is administrative item 14-4840, submitted by Jorgen and Associates for property located north of Marble and Slate, north of Marble and Slate Crossing. Property zone RSF4, residential single-family, 4 units per acre, and contains approximately 8.66 acres. The request is to amend the street step-out location for Raven Lane. Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Chair, before we move to this item,
Oh,
the applicant also requested
You're
for
right.
the remainder lots to be tabled until the next meeting.
All right. Rewind. Okay, well, so we're back to the previous item. I apologize. Forgot about the tabling part of it. Any motions on that? For tabling consideration on lots 18 and 20 through 29?
I guess,
Mr. No, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion, we table discussion on lots 18 and 20 through 29 on variance 14-4869.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to table discussions on lots 18 and 20 through 29 by Commissioner Cook and a second by Commissioner Autry. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins,
Yes.
Ponchel,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Do I need to reread that again? I guess I probably do.
Sure,
All right. Now we're going to move on to item number 7, administrative item 14-4840, submitted by Jorgen Associates for property located north of Marble and Slate Crossing. Property zone RSF4, residential single-family, 4 units per acre, and contains approximately 8.66 acres. The request is to amend the street step-out location for Raven Lane. Now, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, would you mind calling up a plat when you get a second? On July 28th, the Planning Commission saw this item previously as a preliminary plat. You approved a plat for the property that would, and located the future stub-out for Raven Lane. After a little bit of discussion, that alignment was moved to the approved location. Today, the applicant is back to propose an amendment to that alignment. They would like to move that stub out away from the property line, directly, essentially due north, for reasons of future development. Staff is recommending approval of this alignment. It meets our goals for the master street plan in that area. The neighboring properties to the north and to the west are in agreement. I did have some public comment immediately before the meeting. Mr. Thomas Spicer, he owns property to the west. You may remember the points he made at that meeting on July 28th. He wants you to know that he has met with Charlie Sloan, and he has seen this proposed amendment. He is in agreement with it. Essentially, he wasn't for a stub out to his property. He didn't want that master street plan collector touching his property. He does like the proposed amendment. However, he does not like a staff condition of approval, which would require a stub out to the left before the property line that does stub out eventually to his large parcel. So there's an aerial image in your packet that shows the general layout of the Bassett property to the north and the Spicer property to the west. Staff is, despite Mr. Spicer's, well, let me finish what he said. This is family property. He expects his son to inherit, and his son has no intention of developing. Now, I understand that. I appreciate that. I think it's admirable. They plan to keep this in the family. But it is a policy that we do stub out for future development, even past whatever his son may want to do with it. We do have maximum block lengths, and without a stub out there, this property would exceed those maximum block lengths. So staff is going forward and recommending that connection. So again, staff recommends approval of this item with two conditions. That all of the original conditions of approval for the PPL 144790, the original preliminary plat, those remain in force. And number two, that would provide street connectivity, maintain those block lengths by stubbing out to the left, property to the west.
Is that it, sir?
That's it.
Okay. And when you say stub out to the west, what's the name of that street? I can't see it.
There's a
This one, yeah.
Raven Lane. No, it would be. We don't have a.
Yeah, we would be,
diagram for it.
we would be comfortable with either one of these
Yeah.
streets stubbing out to the west. Either this one or this one, just some stub out to this largely undeveloped parcel here owned by Mr. Spicer at this point. That does not have any other access except for a long private driveway through this point.
Okay.
We'd let the applicant propose where that stub out would be.
Okay. Okay, is the applicant present?
Jared Inman with Jorgensen and Associates. Read through the comments. Quinn summed it up. Pretty much everything. We would not like to step out to the west, just to honor Mr. Spicer's wishes. We've talked with both him and the property owner to the north, Ms. Bassett, and they're both in agreement with this proposed alignment. We'd like to stick with it. So if you got any questions, I'll be right here.
All right, thank you, sir. Any member of the audience like to step up and speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. I need to give a little bit of clarification before we go forward. Mr. Thompson?
Sir.
Raven Lane, on this aerial right here, you see where it sweeps to the left? I think we discussed this last time they were through here. Okay? Are they asking to straighten that up to head straight north?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay, I think we even recommended that in the last time they were through here, right?
I believe so.
Okay, and so we just don't have a picture of that.
We do. That is the proposal. It is, it's on the plat that was submitted. I think Andrew should have
Okay,
that.
I see it now.
Okay.
But that plat does not
that is
include the stub out to the west.
correct, because that wasn't part of the proposal. That is one of our recommendations and one of our
Okay.
conditions.
And the stub out to the west, staff is saying it's okay if it's either Marble Drive, which probably has not been constructed yet,
Yes, sir.
okay, or the street to be constructed parallel and north of Marble Drive, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
so.
all right, thank you.
And I'm not
Okay.
that familiar with the street names.
Okay, thank you. Just need some clarification, okay? Commissioners?
I had a question for staff.
Commissioner Winston?
You mentioned that there'd be issues with the block length, and if there wasn't a stub out, because the block is broken up with roads taking off to the east, how does that play into our block length issues when you've got it broken up on one side but not the other?
Well, our policy is to connect to large undeveloped lots. So in this kind of situation, we'd be expecting to connect to both sides of that to create that future connectivity with the block length and multiple connections. Anytime we have large portion of property like that that is unbuilt.
So would, if we were to deny well, if we were to support the request to not have that stub out to the west, would we also then need to give a variance for block length at the same time?
I believe so. Yes.
My personal opinion on this is that there needs to be that connection somewhere along this, and we can keep kicking it down the road as they build farther to the north. But at some point, we're going to need some connection to the west. And maybe it's better to have it farther south than it is to have it farther north. So, I mean, at some point, I would be voting to have a connection out to the west from this development as it works its way north.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hunter.
Quinn, the way that this is drawn or presented without the stub out included, is the applicant going to lose a lot, essentially? Is that?
I believe that's possible. You might wish to speak to Mr. Inman about that. He may have a better idea.
Yeah.
It does appear that way.
You'd lose a lot with the stub out. Well, down here, we wouldn't be able to stub out this street down here because it's already built. That's already a lot. That would be the only location we could stub out, and it would take a lot.
Okay.
And another thing I wanted to point out too, from Raven Lane, the block length, correct me if I'm wrong, Quinn, 600 feet is the block length, or is it 660?
The requirement is 660.
660. We've got 600 and roughly 65 feet from Raven Lane to the very north property line of the development. So, I mean, technically, we're right there without needing to stub out. So, I mean, when the property, and this is, assumptions, if the property to the north develops, we assume that it's going to mirror itself over, and there's going to be another road, a lot or two deep on that side, and then you'll have that stub out to the west. But again, that's assumptions, so. Just want to point that out.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner
I
Winston.
think another option on this is to plat an easement, which we don't usually like to do because they tend to get lost as paperwork, but that would be a half measure.
Yes, it would. I agree. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Mr. Thompson,
Sir.
so let me ask one more time. Marble Drive is currently constructed, or it's under construction, been constructed, non-constructed? Because I thought that he had said,
Yeah, I would probably ask the applicant. We're not familiar with the street names.
okay, I'm sorry. That's a good idea.
Marble is actually in phase 3 of Cobblestone, and it is built, and there are houses being developed right now on it. So it's, yes, that one.
Okay, so Marble Drive, so it would be a pain, but you could put that stub out there at this time. Might not be convenient, but you could do it.
I mean, I would have to ask the builder. I don't know if he's got a house going on that lot right there or not. There's houses being built in there right now. I mean, it's final platted.
Oh, okay, it's final plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So asking for a stub out from Marble, which to me is the most appropriate spot since the stub out to the east is on that end, is on the other end of Marble.
Right.
Okay. Okay, I think I understand now. Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Cook.
I want to ask staff about Mr. Winston's comment about platting at least a access easement. What was your consideration of that?
We would probably recommend that it not be platted at all. We'd probably prefer nothing if it can't be built. It's just caused so much conflict and confusion between property owners and the city. When you have an easement platted, people feel like it's their yard, they don't realize it. Even if there may be some sort of a sign, they plant plants over it, they build garden walls, so we would not recommend it from staff's perspective.
Remember Campbellwood?
Oh, I remember. Just wanted to hear him say it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any motions floating around here? Help. Let's see.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
At least get something started here, if I can get on the right page. We got the right spot, yep. Okay, I'm going to vote, or make a motion to approve preliminary plat 14-4778 and agreeing with all of staff's recommendations of approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Cook.
Say something for y'all about,
Yes, sir.
we would like to request to be tabled to further, maybe get an exhibit for y'all to kind of look at with some alignments and distances, everything, will give y'all a little bit better picture of what's kind of going on out there.
Okay. Absolutely. Take your time, Mr. Long.
Tracy, I'm Charlie Sloan with Riverwood Homes. We were trying to satisfy all the neighbors. That's what this was about, not placing that stub out right there. There's only one street really, that top one, to go out. Mr. Spicer, who's the landowner to the west, had spoke that he really didn't want a stub out there, didn't really care about any kind of connectivity. Just if you keep looking at the aerial photo, it goes through by his house and through his barn and everything, which his son requested also, who was going to eventually take over the property. Like I said, we have houses and stuff already built on the Raven. Raven's a built street approved plat. We're done with it. This was just the last street for us. He just requested, could it be the next street up that stubs over, so it gets sort of avoids everybody's houses and properties and stuff. That's all we did. You know, with the last layout that we didn't have a problem with, it did cause a problem with the Bassett property, with Mary Bassett's her family's property, that they didn't realize that Raven had been changed and went through their property. So we have met with everybody, tried to come up with some kind of compromise that everybody's ready to go. So the request for not doing the stub out is because Mr. Spicer had asked us not to put it in there. So that's where we're at. You know, if that's what we got to do, we'll do it. But we're just trying to accommodate all the neighbors out in that area. That's 6 of one, half dozen to us. The other layout you guys recommended at the last meeting was fine with us. We left the meeting and then realized that no one here from the Zaccanti family was here to represent themselves, to realize that all of a sudden they had a collector street going through their property that they didn't realize, and it was all built on their property. One side, they only had access to one side because it was built up a property line. And that's the reason we requested them to come to our office, have a meeting, and see where we were at. We wanted everybody notified on what was really changed, just trying to be good neighbors on this is all we were trying to do. We didn't want to cause a controversy that would come back on us or anybody or the planning commission later by that being decided. So, since they weren't here last meeting. That's where we're at. We'd like to go ahead and get this thing settled and go on. If we got to stub out, we'll stub out. Preferably, we'd like to not do that for Mr. Spicer's sake, but we'll do whatever the planning commission decides. And I had told Jared if anything changes to table it, but I'm back here with the owner of Riverwood Homes, and he says, let's just go on, whatever we got to do. We need to move forward. We've tabled this as long as, you know, we've actually started this whole process sort of over again to please everybody, and we'd like to get it resolved.
Okay. While you're standing there, Mr. Sloan, so when you're saying a connection to the west in the next phase, you're actually speaking of, that would actually be, I guess, in the future off of the Zaccanti property.
Yes,
To
it
the
would be
west.
one more street up, like Jared was saying. The next street up, we assume would just mirror what we've got, and that would take that street into the next property, which is about half owned by Mr. Spicer and half owned by the next landowner. And and we told them that we would be willing to work an easement. They're outside the city limits right now, but we would be willing to work out easements and everything to make sure that property had sewer if he ever decided to bring it in. But he just did not want that stub out going where it's being shown up at the top of there, which would go directly right through his barn and everything. So this drawing is, if you can pull up the other well, it's hard, because the aerial shows where we're already built, I guess. And then his barn is immediately in-house and stuff is right through there.
Okay.
And that's what he was requesting not to have happen. For health reasons, he just didn't want to come back and sit here in the meeting tonight. He was here at the last meeting, stayed here quite a while, and he, I think he got a hold of Mr. Thompson today and told him that he had met with us. We had everybody come to our office and try to work this situation out. Mm-hmm. And he didn't realize when he had originally asked for a realignment of Raven that he was causing the Zacantes a problem because that road wasn't going on their property originally.
Okay.
They were just going to pick up two of our other stub outs when and if it developed and gone down the road. But it's not, since things got changed and they were not aware of it, after the meeting, driving home, I got to thinking about it, and we called Mark. Mark was the owner, and said, hey, we better look at this thing over again and get back with all the homeowners and make sure everybody's on the same page. We'll build, we're ready to go ahead and go forward. So, and the other situation didn't cause us, wherever Raven went north, it didn't bother us one bit. We'd put it wherever you guys wanted to.
So I assume you do not want this table tonight then?
No, let's just go ahead and go on. I'm sorry, I gave Jared the direction if it changed very much, but Mark's here to make a decision. Let's get it going.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Sloan.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
I
West.
just wanted to address the motion on the floor. So considering that they are looking at building a stub out to the west in the next phase, that satisfies my wanting to have that connection at some point. And if that's fine with the property owners, then I would be making a motion after this, if it didn't pass, to pass this as it is and also allow a variance in block line.
Okay.
Can I comment to that?
Sure.
I guess my issue is we're not talking about the next phase, we're talking about this phase. And we don't have any guarantees what's gonna happen on the next phase. I mean, I like Mr. Sloan, I don't doubt anything he tells me, but, and I appreciate him working with all the property owners around there, but we don't have anything in our hands that says there will be a connection at the next phase to the west. That's why I made my motion.
If I can address that, if there isn't more construction, more development in this area, then I don't think we'd need the connection. I think if there is more development, then we will need the connection. So I think it takes care of itself. And then at this point, the property owners to the east and the developer both know that we're going to be expecting to have that platted, that connection platted in the next go-round. Does that make sense?
Okay. So I guess because we've had so much conversation since then, would you like to
No?
restate your motion?
No?
You don't want to restate it? Okay, well, somebody's got to restate it for me because I don't know what it is.
The motion is to approve the street stub out as requested by the applicant with the conditions recommended by staff, which would require the stub out to the west.
I'm sorry, Chair, I thought you were asking me to change my motion.
No. I'd never do such a thing. Okay.
And I still second it.
Okay, Mr. Garner, do you think, I mean, I would hate to deny the entire preliminary plat based on disagreement on the stub out. Could we vote on that separately?
Yeah, the preliminary plat is not in question. This is
Okay.
just to amend one of the conditions of approval of the plat, which was related solely to the stub out.
Okay, so in other words, if we vote yes on Commissioner Cook's motion, then the stub out is required. If we vote no on Commissioner Cook's motion, then the stub out is not required.
If you vote no on the motion, then that's correct, and then this realignment of this stub out as proposed, would not be allowed. It would have to go back to the original approved plat, which required the property to be, the street was routed over to the northwest corner.
Okay, so we are actually looking at two things in this. We're looking at the stub out to the west and the realignment of Raven. Is that correct? Okay. That's what I'm saying, should we consider separating those two so we don't have to vote no on the whole thing just because we didn't agree on a stub out? I'd like to see us vote on them separately, in other words.
That's your call, however you want to do it.
Any comments from you, City
Go
Attorney?
ahead, vote on it separately if you'd like to.
Okay, so what do I do about this motion lingering?
It's a motion and a second, and it needs to be voted on unless it's withdrawn.
Okay? I don't suppose that's going to
Chair,
happen, is
just
it?
to clarify, so just so everybody understands, that if you vote for the motion, then it realigns the road and requires a stub out. If you vote against the motion, then it puts it back to where the road veered off to the east and then headed up the property line. And if the motion fails, then I will make a motion allowing the realignment as it is and not requiring the stub out.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. Yes, I do. Okay. All right. So we have a motion to approve, including the stub out to the west and realignment of Raven to the north by Commissioner Cook, and a second by Commissioner Autry. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins?
No.
Honchel?
No.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
No.
Bunch?
No.
Noble?
No.
Selby?
No.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Commissioner Winston?
Let's get back to, I'll make a motion to approve the, let's see, 14-4840 with the alignment as it's currently drawn, not requiring a stub out to the west in this phase, but the explicit expectation that there will be a stub out to the west in the next phase, and allowing a variance in block length.
Okay. All right.
Second.
Second? All right. We have a motion to approve the realignment of Raven Drive, deleting the required stub out to the west, and a variance, excuse me, and block length by Commissioner Winston, and a second by Commissioner Honchel. Mr. Gardner?
Hoskins?
Yes.
Honchel?
Yes.
Cook? No. Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
No.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is conditional use permit 14-4854, submitted by Parks and Recreation staff for property located at 2600 West Judge Cummings Road. The property is zoned P1 institutional, contains approximately 60 acres. The request is for additional parking. Mr. Garner.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll just present the conditional use in the large scale in one report, and then the commission will vote on those two separately. The property is located southwest Fayetteville, along Cato Springs Road, State Highway 265. The actual project development site for the regional park is 60 acres. It's zoned P1 institutional. The property is part of the overall 630 acres owned by the city. This includes a 200-acre regional park property and a 56-acre landfill, and including 328 acres of the Mount Kessler property that was recently purchased by the city, and a 48-acre parcel deeded by Chambers Bank to be used as parkland credit for future development. The city is requesting large-scale development for Phase 1 of the regional park, which would include 10 ball fields, concession stands, restrooms, a great lawn with an amphitheater, and a regional greenway trail. And I'll pull up the overall site plan. As far as the development goes, it would mainly be the main infrastructure improvement would be a construction of a new public road, utilizing the Judge Cummings Road coming into the property. This is a collector street on the master street plan until it enters into the park, then it would transition into a local street. As you can see here throughout the park, a majority of these ball fields are kind of located on this northern portion of the site. And staff is recommending, as you can see on these plans that are drawn up, that sidewalk not be required along the main entrance here, and that as these pieces of property are developed, sidewalk would be proposed. And then as the project enters the property site, we're recommending that an 8-foot sidewalk be provided along this north and western side of the street. This is where most of the pedestrians will park and walk through the park, and access into the park for cyclists and pedestrians will also be provided through the regional greenway trail that will connect up into this, near this, this park entrance in this area. As part of the development, our parking codes require for a regional park 2 parking spaces for every acre, and the parking ratio anticipated that there would be a lot of land used for passive recreation and active recreation, and so that's why it includes such a low parking ratio. On this development site, for 60 acres, we're developing it solely for active use with ball fields. There's not the passive park, and so we need a lot more parking spaces to support the park users than our code allows. And along with, that's the conditional use permit portion of the project. Along with the conditional use permit, we're recommending variances of the requirement to plant an additional tree for every 10 additional spaces, and then a variance of the requirement to install low-impact development stormwater techniques. And as the commission realized, when developments come through and you build large parking lots, larger than what our code would require, you have to mitigate that additional pavement by installing some of these environmental features. In this case, we feel like the parking ratio doesn't really even apply because it's really anticipated for active and passive space. So we don't feel like the city should, the applicant, the city in this case, should be penalized by having to install those additional landscaping and stormwater drainage just for a fact that the parking ratio doesn't really fit what's being developed. Along with the large-scale development, there are a couple of variances being requested. One of them is for the street cross-section. As mentioned, there's sidewalk proposed only on one side of the street, and we're proposing an 8-foot sidewalk to support a higher volume of pedestrians. Under our code, a local street requires sidewalk on both sides. However, as you can see, throughout the park, most of the development is only on one side of the road, and so we're recommending that just a wider sidewalk be on one side, and this ravine area down here be left undisturbed without grading for a sidewalk. We're also recommending variances because there's on-street angled parking in the street, and that's not in our master street plan cross-section. Some other variances that are associated with the large-scale development include the curb return radius for some of the driveways, and if the commissioners are familiar, a curb return radius is just the radius when you turn into a driveway off of the street, and that's kind of this angle at this point. And we're requesting some smaller radiuses for this driveway here because it is accessed off of a curb, and in order to keep the driveway narrow, we need that to meet the geometry. In addition, these two driveways here on the western side, where the right-of-way touches the driveway, these are wider than our code would allow. However, this is really caused by the fact that the right-of-way is offset because of the street cross-section with sidewalk only on one side. And so the right-of-way is actually after the cars have started turning into the street. So we feel like those variances are warranted just to accommodate the turning movements of a regular 2-lane driveway in this case. So with the conditional use permit, there's a determination of the variances for the parking spaces. And then for the large scale, there's several variances and determinations to be made through your conditions of approval, number 1 through 3. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Guess we don't need to hear from the applicant. I think we just did, right?
Right.
Okay. So, unless maybe Allison Shepard's in the back and would like to say something. Look, there she is. Go figure.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Sorry, I was hiding. I don't have a lot to add other than what Andrew said, but I would like to say that we are excited to be moving forward with this project. It's been a long time coming, and we're happy to get going with it. As Andrew mentioned, this is the first phase. We hope to get the ball rolling with this and then hopefully continue on with future phases of the park. We did work with our consulting team, Lawson Associates and Garver, to try to design the park as sensitively as we could to the existing topography and meet the program that we need to fit on the site to meet the needs of the citizens. I'm here as well as Tom Henley with Garver. He's also on the consulting team to answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public like to speak to this item? Okay. If you will, give us your name, sir, and anything you might want to add.
Yes, Hunter Haynes. It's been great having an opportunity to work with Parks and Rec and with staff on laying out, having the adjacent property being owned by the bank and working with them. There is one thing that did come to our attention as we were looking at this. We were approached by part of the design team with Lawson Associates and also Parks and Rec on looking at relocating one of the interior streets, required streets that was going to be required. I don't know that it's not shown on any of these at this time. Andrew, if you could maybe go up to the top where the roundabout is, if you don't mind. And I think there's another, I apologize. It's LSD, just 100. You've got that.
I'm not sure you want me to try to pull up another, Mr. Chair, do you want me to try to pull up the drawings he's looking for? I'm not
Sure, absolutely.
I apologize.
So you're not looking for this drawing? You're looking for a zoom up, the close-up site plan?
There's another. I can show you if you like. It actually shows an extension of the road, the interior park road that ends in a cul-de-sac, continuing on to the north.
Andrew, it's on the map. It comes with the packet.
Yeah, the last sheet has it, actually.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you. There you go. Next to subject property, if you see there's a line drawing of a road that continues north and then west. And when I was asked to come and attend a meeting to take a look at, there was a design constraint that was happening by having to place that road on the city's property. It was in close proximity to the existing stream, trail, and then the future amenities that were going to come along there. Created design from just overall design and also cost perspective. And what was asked was, would the neighboring property owner consider relocating that road and having that extend to the north so as to alleviate those problems for the city? At that meeting, when we talked about it, the idea was if the neighboring property owner was willing to do so, that road would be built on the north area in exchange for allowing that. Then worked with Lawson Associates, worked with the design group to come up with a route that would work for the city, Parks and Rec, and overall in doing that. That was then presented to the bank, and it was then subsequently agreed that yes, that would work, provided the city would build the road to the north, what was then proposed as a roundabout, and then to the west. What's coming through tonight, it does not reflect that. And as the neighboring property owner here, we agreed that we would allow that and do that based on those things. So it's kind of a question mark we have in trying to honor all of our agreements. It came through as an amendment to the master street plan to allow that to happen. We supported that based on those conversations that we had in those meetings. Other than that, we're very excited. It's been great working with staff. Everyone's been wonderful to work with. I just want to, the devil's in the details, they say, and I certainly don't want anything to slip through the cracks.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We will check into that for you.
Thank you.
Any other member of the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. I guess the first thing we need to do is address Mr. Okay. If you will, give us your name, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Sonia Davis Gutierrez. I have a question about, is there any plan to include any public art in the park as part of the budget?
Okay. Okay, well, Andrew, I'll go ahead and ask you that. I don't think we consider that with a large-scale development or a variance, but,
No, I mean, I'm not aware of that, if whether we are or we're not considering public art.
so I guess the answer we'd have to give you is no until further notice. Okay? Mr. Garner, could you please address Mr. Haynes' concern about
Sure.
the missing street, I guess it is, or something?
What Mr. Haynes is discussing, yeah, a street that's missing what he's understanding from, as an adjacent property owner. That particular issue is not something for the planning commission to consider tonight. That's something that if, it sounds like Chambers Bank was under the impression that a certain road was going to be built by the city potentially. That would be some sort of a cost share issue that's approved by city council. It's not under the purview of the planning commission. Tonight, you're just looking at this development, does it meet the city's development codes? And so that issue is certainly relevant to them and to the city, but not for the consideration tonight for this large scale.
Okay, but wouldn't would that street eventually enter into this large-scale development we're approving tonight? In other words, wouldn't it become part of the large-scale development itself?
It wouldn't be part of this phase. I mean, this development meets all the master street plan requirements. The road's being built in accordance with the master street plan. As the project gets developed future and as the property around it develops, street connectivity would be required. But all the collector streets that were going through the park were taken off the master street plan except for the one entrance off of Judge Cummings Road. So this project complies with all the master street plan requirements and any street connectivity requirements that were anticipated.
Okay. I guess my confusion is kind of like the item we had before us earlier tonight, we're talking about a stub out. And I would think that if there was going to be another street that would eventually become part of this, that a stub out would be provided at this time. Not so?
I'm not fully following, the issue on where they want a street sub out that's not provided here, or I think they actually want more street constructed than what is proposed. But, I'll just, again, advise the commission that any sort of additional street construction by the city above and beyond, what's being proposed here is not really relevant.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Winston, yes.
Andrew, you mentioned several variances that are not addressed in the staff report as far as the conditions of approval, as far as like the angle in parking or the curb ratio and stuff like that. Do we need to address that, or?
They are in the staff report. Sorry, I may have misspoken.
Okay.
When you go through the conditions of approval and the conditional use permit, there's one determination to be made in particular about some variances. And then whenever you guys make the motion about the large-scale development, there's also work your way through those conditions of approval, numbers 1 through 3.
Yeah, and we've
Okay.
kind of gotten off track just a
I think
little
I'm
bit.
finding them.
We've gotten off track just a little bit. We were working on number 8, the conditional use, and we haven't really, and even though staff presented both the conditional use and the large-scale development, we're really not to the large-scale development yet.
I see.
Okay.
That's where I was missing it. I was looking at the first item, not the second.
And so basically, in the first item, the conditional use, we're talking about variances, or one of those is parking. And I can't find the rest of them. Should have studied better.
So, Mr. Chair, I can address, make a motion on the conditional use permit. We'll start with that one since it's up on front. Move to approve conditional use permit 14-4854 with the two conditions of approval, one regarding the number of additional spaces and approval of the associated large-scale development 14-4819.
Second.
Any other comments yet? No? Okay. I guess this conditional use permit is about the parking itself. Mr. Garner, what is the, by code, what is the allowed parking spaces?
2 per acre,
And how much is that in this case?
120.
120, and Parks is asking for how many spaces? 450?
424,
424, okay,
in addition to 44 additional on-street angled spaces.
okay. So basically, they're asking for an additional 304 spaces? 304 spaces, okay. And so, to the common person that would walk in here and ask for such a variance, we would require 30 trees, 30 additional trees, and LID features. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so I would consider the park itself the LID feature, I guess, lots of grass, natural area, whatever. However, though, I do not support us as a city who we drive these ordinances, these regulations, we drive those home pretty hard on private development. And so we're talking about 30 trees to a municipality. And so I think that the city needs to install those trees just like anybody else would have to. And so, so I will not support the conditional use permit without the addition of the trees.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Winston?
normally I would request that staff go back and work out a brand-new parking ratio for regional parks, but I think that this is a bit of a one-off.
No, that would be something that would be done with city council. So, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Winston, and a second by Commissioner, was it? Selby, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Okay, and Mr. Garner?
Hoskins?
No.
Honchul?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Oh, I got hammered on that one, didn't I? Okay. All right. So, all right, that brings us to the next item, the large-scale development portion of this, that 14-4819. Of course, also submitted by Parks and Rec staff, and we've already heard staff's report. So I guess we can move forward. Is there anybody in the public who'd like to comment? Step up, sir.
I appreciate what Mr. Garner was saying earlier regarding changes or something that was proposed possibly in future phases, but I have one copy, and I do apologize if I may approach and give this to you. This is what was provided by Wilson Associates. And as you can see, it only shows Phase 1 of the park as part of it. It shows the road continuing on. It does not show a roundabout ending at the property line and moving up. It shows a road continuing on to the east through the property. We're not asking the city to do that. That was not part of our discussions or arrangements in any way. But that was what was provided by LOS in working with the Parks and Rec and LOS in coming up with a workable solution. And it's not what I see here tonight in the large-scale development plans. There's a lot of wonderful stuff. It's just missing a key element.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, just a minute, please.
Well, while he's up here,
Oh, okay,
I just
okay.
have
Go
a
ahead.
real quick question.
Yes.
So with what you're showing us here, it would put you kind of at ease to see some type of stub out at this phase?
At this,
with-
yes, sir, yeah.
to
And having
give you
having
some-
that road come to the roundabout and continuing on to the water tower road was the intent and what was described to us.
Okay.
And then we sat and we literally doodled on an existing map showing where the problems were and came up with it. And when Lawson Associates got back to their offices, we immediately started emailing back and forth on design changes and work to what you see right there.
Okay. And I guess my next question, Mr. Gardner, the stub out that was, I guess, well, I know this is the first phase, but even representing a stub out for the future development to the north, do you know why that was omitted at this phase, or?
The road stubs out here to the north.
Well,
This
what,
road will connect
what,
from that.
what he's showing us here on his drawing, there would be a stub out. Is it Cummings, Judge Cummings Road? About halfway, what that drawing is representing is that there should be some type of stub out at this phase, something to show that there's going to be future development or a future road to the north at some point.
At this point, like that right in that area?
Correct.
Yeah, and that right of way in the road does connect all the way to that property line. They could certainly tie into it.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Hunter. Really, the area in question is not that. It's the roundabout, as you can see on the far left. It's that road, continues on up on that drawing. It continues on up to a roundabout located on about where that circle kind of topo is, and then heads back west to the left. That was what we had discussed and shown.
Yeah, and again, Mr. Chair, the agreement between Chambers Bank and the city on who's going to build all these different roads and things like that, I would just say, those are not relevant to whether this large scale meets the development requirements in the master street plan at this point. So I would encourage the commission to go ahead and those are issues I think that Mr. Haynes will have to discuss with others that are not the planning commission. This is not a place to negotiate, street being built and things like that.
But it does mean that he may have the opportunity to, or it does mean that Parks and Rec may have to resubmit a portion of this large-scale development later to reflect what he's talking about once they get it all worked out.
That would be possible if the city agreed to build additional roadways. They would have to, the large scale could be modified at that point.
Okay, so, in other words, we understand what you're saying, and obviously, we're not going to be allowed to look at that tonight, okay? But I would encourage you to continue with
I
city
can
staff.
assure you that, yes, sir. Thank you very much.
And then if that's the case, if what you're saying is what was supposed to happen, then I'm sure they'll have to bring this back through for a modification, so.
Thank
okay?
you.
Thank you, sir. Okay,
Mr.
Commissioner Winston.
Mr. Chair, to that point, I sort of consider a roundabout to be a universal stub out. You can come off in any direction,
But we don't have
and the expectation of, if there's a roundabout, there's an expectation that it's going to be connected to more than one thing. So I think that's sort of being covered just by the fact that it's a roundabout, not a hammerhead or something like that. So I'm going to move to approve large-scale development 14-4819. Finding in favor determination regarding the Master Street cross-section, allowing the sidewalk on one side and on-street angle parking, and an 8-foot sidewalk on the side of the street. And number 2, determination of funding in favor of variance to the Unified Development Code, allowing a curb return radius to be 15 feet and 12 feet, and finding in favor of the suggested street improvements and the other 12 conditions of approval.
Second.
Okay.
Like we all woke up down here.
Andrea, I'd like to ask a question before we move forward. And that is, one of the I guess the variances in this large-scale development is the 8-foot sidewalk will be continued to basically the properties that are undeveloped to the east of this. That's, in other words, not all the way out to Highway 265?
Right.
Okay? And even though the city shows on here that the parcel goes all the way out to Highway 265. So I guess I'm kind of curious, we've got a dead spot between 265 and the regional park with no sidewalk. Who do we expect to build that and when?
Well, two answers to the question. One is that the Regional Greenway will be coming into the site from the northeast, providing pedestrian and cyclist pedestrian access from the northeast. So that's where immediately, that will happen quickly. The portion of the site between the park and Caddo Springs Road, it's not even being developed right now. It's not even a part of the project site per se for the park. These are undeveloped parcels. I think at the time whenever those parcels develop, sidewalk would be built along that stretch.
Okay, who owns those parcels?
I believe Chambers Bank may own the one to the north, and I'm not sure that one to the south is a different property owner.
Okay, all right. All right, we got a motion to approve by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Bunch. Mr. Garner.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Ponchel?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. On to the next item, number 10, preliminary plat submitted by Blue and Associates for property located at Oakland Zion Road. The property is in the Fayetteville planning area and contains approximately 16.7 acres. The request is for an 8-lot, single-family subdivision. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property is located east of Oakland Zion Road, approximately 16 acres. It is in Washington County, unincorporated area of Washington County, just outside of our property boundary. It is in the 1-mile planning area, therefore, and must meet all the requirements of development in our city. A proposed master street plan connection does cross this property. That street should be a collector according to the master street plan, and that would require a 30-foot street section, sidewalk on 2 sides, curb and gutter, street lights, etc. The applicant is requesting these 8 lots, including 2 lots for stormwater detention. Staff's recommending approval of this preliminary plat with several conditions. One, that Planning Commission determine variance for sidewalk on the north side of Oakland Zion alone, from the west property boundary all the way to Lot 7. Second would be determination of the master street plan downgrade to a collector street, which staff is recommending against. A Planning Commission determination of variance for the maximum block length requirement. In staff's opinion, the street connection proposed are appropriate, given the amount of area, the amount of development that's already occurred out there, the large scale of lots and homes, et cetera. Number 3, Planning Commission determination of variance to the, Number 4, Planning Commission determination of variance for dead-end street at Oakland Court. Properties again to the south, we don't anticipate development down there, and think that is an appropriate block length and appropriate dead end this time. So with those conditions and the more standard conditions that you see below, we are recommending that you approve this tonight.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present, please?
Good evening. My name is George DeCame with Blue & Associates. I am the engineer on the project. The property owner is also available if you have any questions. He'd probably like to talk a little bit about the project. But very quickly, we're looking at an 8-lot, single-family subdivision with 2 detention ponds. We're going to take the detention ponds and route them into an existing channel and therefore out through the natural drainage system. And now, Mr. Parker is available, and I think he'd like to say a few words as well.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mike Parker, the owner, and what we really have is really 7 home sites is what this would amount to. There's one called Lot 6, and it's just got a big metal building on it that is a shop and storage. It's not really a lot for the subdivision as such. Oakland Zion Road has just been repaved, widened, and resurfaced with the half-cent sales tax county money that was passed to do those kinds of things. We asked that this be approved so we can move on to city council, and we've also petitioned for the main road going into this small addition for the master street plan to be modified, that we not build a 30-foot wide street into 7 lots and it dead end at a horse stable that is to the north and to the west of this property. So if anybody has a question, I'll be glad to answer, but that's basically it. All of the folks, they're all pre-sold lots, super nice people, going to build nice homes there. They wanted this to be kind of an intimate little community. It's kind of a street going from nowhere to nowhere. So, and if it ever did connect all the way over, it would go through Sloan Estates and 2 other properties. You'd have to wind through subdivisions to use it for a cut through, and then you'd be going to Oakland Zion Road, which is not that big of it's an arterial street, I believe. So anyway, that's what we're doing there. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, sir. Any member of the audience that'd like to speak to this item? If you will, sir, give us your name and anything you'd like to...
Lucas Campbell, one of the potential lot owners, specifically the one in the upper right-hand corner, which would obviously border the potential collector street. And I really want to echo what Mike said about this being a private, really intimate, small development. Living on that particular lot, the potential of a 30-foot wide collector street is very unattractive for child safety, privacy. Most of the reasons why we chose to potentially live here. So I would like the commission to really consider deviating from this 30-foot wide street requirement.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Trish Dick, and I'm another family member that's going to be purchasing a lot right across from the Lucases. And we agree that we are all wanting just a small private neighborhood. It's very pasture-like, intimate, and all have small children, families, and we would like to keep it that way.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else like to speak to this item? Better hurry.
I'm Mike Wagner, and a family and I, we're also going to purchase a lot out here. Have already purchased a lot out here. We're going to be at lot number 4 here in I guess at the dead end of the cul-de-sac there. But the first thing that attracted us to the area out there is just the intimacy of it. It's very quiet. It's a very country-type setting, and to go in there with a 30-foot wide road just really doesn't make any sense. I know it's part of the city's plan, but it's going to be very unattractive. I mean, you're going to have a big, wide industrial lane in there, and like I said, it's going to be just small homes, a quiet setting. It's beautiful country out there. It just seems it would be a shame to widen it up there. Oakland Zion itself can't be more than 16, 17 feet wide. You'd have a big major road going into such a small road like that. I would just ask the committee to really take it under consideration for this. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak to this? Maybe some more future lot owners? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Winston.
so I'd move to approve PPL 14-4790, finding in favor of the variance to a sidewalk along one side of Parkman Downs, finding in favor of an amendment to the master street plan to downgrade the collector to a local street, not what staff's proposing, but what the people are asking for, and variance to maximum block lengths, and variance for the dead-end street at Oak Lawn Court. And the other 13 conditions of approval as stated in the staff report.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Honchel, and that included the downgrading of the street from a collector to a local street, which I think it also has to go to the city council, I believe. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins?
Yes.
Honchel?
Yes.
Cook?
No.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. This time you were the odd man out. That makes each one of us tonight, sometimes, okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is number 11, rezone 14-4848, submitted by Development Consultants for property located at 940 West Maple Street. The property is zoned P1 institutional and RMF 40, residential multifamily 40 units per acre, and contains approximately 0.8 acres. The request is to rezone the property to RMF 40, residential multifamily 40 units per acre. Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is property at the northwest corner of Maple Street and Oakland Avenue. It's currently developed with the Kyle Mega Sorority House and associated parking. What's unique about this property is that it's split zoned RMF 40 and P1 institutional. We did a little bit of research into the history of the property, and I think we made it back to the 50s, and it's always been that split zoning. Never figured out why, but that's where we're at today.
Cool.
That makes part of the property non-conforming. That is, you cannot have a multifamily land use within the P1 institutional zoning district. They're wanting to do some renovations, potential expansions to the building that would encroach into that P1 zoning area. We had discussed the conditional use process, which was an option. They decided it was best in the long-term interest of the property to have it rezoned to RMF 40 to match the existing land use. We completely agree with that decision as well. It's historically, again, for several decades been used as a sorority house, multifamily housing. All the adjacent property, for the most part, with the exception of some university properties, are zoned multifamily. It's in the city neighborhood area as far as our future land use map goes. That supports a wide range of densities and housing types. So it's consistent with that and, of course, with surrounding land uses. So we are recommending that this be forwarded to the city council with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is the applicant present?
I'm Alan J. Young with Development Consultants. I'm the representative for the owner and available if you have any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any member of the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Winston.
I'll move to forward to City Council with a recommendation for approval, rezone 14-4848.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Winston, and a second by Commissioner Honchel. Mr. Garner.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Honchel?
Yes.
Cook? Yes. Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Something we finally all agree on, right? All right. All right. Now we get to the fun part of our agenda. All right. Item number 12, rezone 14-4850, submitted by CEI Engineering for property located on the north side of MLK Boulevard between Government Avenue and Hill Avenue. The property is zoned I-1 heavy commercial light industrial and contains approximately 4.8 acres. The request is to rezone the property to C2 thoroughfare commercial. Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I passed out to the commission is a handout that was included in your staff report, as well as 4 emails that I provided to the commission last week that we received from the public opposing the rezoning request. And I've got a copy for the applicants if they'd like one as well. As you mentioned, the property is at the northwest corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Government Avenue. It's actually 12 separate lots that are all developed with a variety of several warehouses. There's some commercial buildings where they've been doing auto repair, U-Haul rental, some undeveloped areas. And then it's adjacent to 2 lots that are already zoned C2 commercial that are under common ownership that would provide ultimate access to Hill Avenue to the west of this. The property that we're looking at is all currently zoned I-1. and the property owners are requesting to rezone to C2 thoroughfare commercial. As I noted, we did receive some public comment that I provided. Also, the neighbor to the north, I did notice them out here, may have some comments as well. There was just a minor legal description issue that I've been discussing with him and with the applicants. I think it's all close to being worked out. It's just a matter of some very old confusing deeds and exactly where that precise property line is in an old portion of the city, which makes it difficult to track sometimes. But I do know that the applicant, their surveyor, the property owner to the north, and his surveyor that's worked on the properties are all working together to get that resolved prior to city council. Honestly, I've been thinking about this project for a number of weeks, and I didn't know kind of how to approach it. It's a little bit different. It's not a request that we see very often, so I've been kind of over here scribbling down while y'all have been going through the last couple of items. And I'm glad I actually provided this handout from our staff report, because it makes a statement that I think is why I've struggled with how to approach this rezoning request. And what it states at the very beginning of this, and this is out of the downtown master plan that was adopted by the City Council and Planning Commission back in '04. And it says, "The Mill District is different in character and appearance from the other parts of downtown due to its industrial building history." This property is directly adjacent to the Mill District and the downtown master plan boundary. As I noted on that handout, Government Avenue is the boundary where it stops. This property is on the west side. The Mill District, the downtown area, is on the east side of Government Avenue. The property is currently zoned industrial, as was all of the Mill District prior to the downtown master plan. So I think that's the challenge, in that I see this property, I think we see this property as staff, as it's industrial property. It's got a lot of older buildings on it, all being used for industrial and heavy commercial uses. And so it almost feels easy to rezone it to anything else, honestly, than leaving it as I-1. I think I've even heard the term down zone, which is typically a good thing when you have an intensive land use. But I think we can't look at a property in the bubble that exists within the boundaries of the property. When you look at this property, it is directly adjacent to the downtown master plan area. It's essentially a gateway into downtown, into the Walker Park area. And taking another note, I think, from this handout is that downtown experience, that gateway experience that I think we all feel when we approach downtown, whether it be from North College or from South School. When you're coming into the downtown area, the land use has changed, the topography or the typology of the buildings change, and you can feel the change in experience from one area to the other. I did a lot of research into the history of this particular property, or these particular properties in this area, and didn't include necessarily those older images, but MLK used to have a different street name. It used to be a different area. It used to be all predominantly housing. You had some industrial uses, a lot of wood-making facilities to the south along the railroad tracks, but it was predominantly a residential area, probably with people walking over to these commercial areas for work. It wasn't until MLK was widened, at the time 6th Street, and a lot of these properties were redeveloped, they were removed. In this particular case, this property, these homes were removed. There's still a few remaining, and I included some of the photographs in the staff report. And if you look closely, you'll notice a lot of those old houses. They may be arts and crafts stores, or it may be a drive-in, but you'll notice that all those buildings date from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and they're intermixed within many of the properties that were built afterwards, including those on this property that date back more to the 80s and 90s. That properties have been redeveloped. So you can see that it has that kind of urban fabric to it. It's just kind of been chipped away a little bit over the decades. I think I also included some photographs of some new housing around the corner. They're off West Street. So you're beginning to see some redevelopment in this area as well. That actually, I think, further to the east on MLK, you've seen heavy redevelopment. Certainly urban, predominantly residential, certainly a little bit different than the typology of buildings that you've seen down there, but it's certainly in an urban character that's taking place. And that's certainly a contrast to what we've seen to the west of this property. Further west, I think once you get to about the high school and continuing west, it's certainly C2. It's a lot of strip commercial centers, drive-through restaurants. It's predominantly C2 and C1. As you're approaching the bypass, traffic speeds get higher. There's a lot more traffic, a lot more curb cuts, a lot more commercial uses. So you've got really different contrasting land uses and building patterns to the east and west of the site. I think this site is somewhere kind of in between. It used to be one thing, it's slowly started to slide towards another type of land use pattern, but it's kind of held its own a little bit. And I think that's where we're at today, is we're looking at 5 acres to be rezoned to a C2, a commercial thoroughfare type zoning district, where you tend to see what we've seen, the building patterns to the west, where you get a type of development pattern more consistent with suburban development than the urban development that is consistent with the context of the neighborhood. I think that's the concern that we had, is that the context of this area is not the same as the area to the west, and that C2 zoning district would not fit the context of this neighborhood. In our staff report, we noted several findings. We, I think, outlined all of the guiding policies of the city neighborhood area. I think several of those are very relevant about encouraging pedestrian-friendly mixed-use buildings. That's very challenging to do in our experience with C2 zoning, because you do tend to have the buildings at the back of the property, the parking lots at the front, and that's not pedestrian-friendly. It's very difficult to make that. You combine that with a highly traveled roadway such as MLK, and you make it very unappealing to walking, and that is not consistent. I think if you take one block to the north, or even blocks to the south, where you've started to see a lot of housing that has remained or been redeveloped, even the student housing, there's a lot of student activity in this area, a lot of people trying to get to bus stops and to the university. And so you have the ability to encourage pedestrian amenities to provide those types of things in this area. And a C2 zoning district, in our opinion, will discourage that in the area. Looking at block and street layouts that are cyclist-friendly, road designs that are slow design speeds. Again, building placement has a lot to do with walkability and design speeds. Moving buildings away from the street encourages higher design speeds or higher roadway speeds, because you don't have that really any concern. You have wide lanes, you feel kind of open, there's really nothing on either side of you that give you concerns. When you begin to get into a more urbanized area, you begin to slow down, because psychologically you feel that there's something that you need to be more concerned, whether it's pedestrians or vehicles moving near you. It makes you slow down, and that is helpful, and building form can influence that. Overall, I think we tried to really lay out our findings in here to really look at what our adopted policies and policies are for the Downtown Master Plan for City Plan 2030 within our staff report. And ultimately, don't feel that the C2 zoning district, particularly when you're looking at 5 acres in this location adjacent to downtown, is an appropriate land use decision, and it doesn't match our adopted policies. And so we do recommend that the rezoning not be approved by the Planning Commission or City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is applicant present?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Stephen Giles, and I'm here for the Hannas who own this property. And they wanted me to express to you that families own the property since 1968, and they've grown up with it as an industrial use. But they have seen how the city has developed over the years, and the patterns have changed. They're very sensitive to the city's goals and objectives, particularly in the 2030 plan. And they've seen the urban design guidelines that have been enacted on property that's just across the street from here. But it's a situation where they know that industrial zoning is not the right zoning there anymore. But given the constraints of the slope and the very expensive development, they needed to have it rezoned to C2 thoroughfare district, because one, it's located on a thoroughfare, MLK. And so they have a proposed use that will incorporate a lot of these design elements. But right now we're just talking about rezoning the property. But you know, the rezoning and the use goes to what's it going to be, and the Hannas can't commit to that. They can tell you that they have a developer who is willing to develop the property that meets goals and objectives and provides neighborhood shopping, which is, you know, that's what you want to see in the area. And so, you know, thousands of people live around there. And we think that this project at this location would reduce the city's carbon footprint so that people can shop there instead of driving all the way across town or wherever they go for that kind of shopping. So, you know, if I'm here to answer questions, but I sent you a letter on September 17th and kind of outlined what is proposed and what will happen if it's rezoned, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Is there any member of the public like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Okay. All right. If you will, sir, give us your name and anything you'd like to add, and as brief as possible.
I'm Dwight Rash, and I've been in South Fayetteville for 40 years. And I agree with what Mr. Giles said about the traffic problem. If you want to go to a grocery store, I mean, you can shop at the little stores, but if you want to buy groceries, you've got to go all the way across town. You've got to go out to Joyce Street, or you've got to go to MLK all the way almost to Farmington through all the traffic. And I believe that a neighborhood grocery store would completely serve that end of town and would be a very positive thing for people who could walk or bicycle. It's near the trail. It's near MLK. And I believe it would serve a big gap that if you live down there and you want to go buy groceries, it would be a very, full-service grocery store there near the center of town. And I think this is an opportunity to do it, and I support it.
Thank you, sir.
What I have to bring to this discussion is
Sir, could you give us your name, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Hank Kaminsky.
Okay.
And I own property on the south side of Martin Luther King Boulevard, directly opposite this parcel. And I have mixed feelings, really mixed feelings about this. And my wife is also very concerned about the aesthetics of the environment, the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I don't believe that with the store, which will not be named apparently, that wants to locate there, that will have a visual piece of property that we can approve, or we can be happy with. We own a little cottage with trees on it, and it's an art establishment, and we would like to see some of that sort of thing introduced into this discussion, some art on the subject. I was quite surprised when Mr. Fulcher indicated that the staff was not approving of this rezoning, because that's the part that I'm concerned with. I don't usually like getting up and talking in this condition here because I feel like an inquisitor. But
you're doing
anyway,
fine.
We will gain property value if the place is improved, but we will lose certain kinds of value that we're not interested in losing.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, Sonia Davis Gutierrez. I started a business there on that corner of Government, and at that point it was 6th Street. It was very affordable for a new business owner to start a business there, have a business kind of incubation, small neighborhood feel. Excellent location to start a business because you had so much traffic there. I'm not sure if a small business owner who wants to start a business could afford rent if it gets zoned in a different way. So I'm for keeping it as it is and not for the thoroughfare zoning.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Alex Muller, and I own a lot of rental property near there. I have a lot of tenants, and I think a shopping area would be good. It would make it more walkable. I think it would be a good idea it would improve, and especially, I think it would look better than what's there now. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, now we'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, Mr. Pennington, it looks like there. You got the
Mr.
right tag.
Chair, I was a little bit late tonight because I was preparing one of my famous memos, actually. It's very similar to ones I've done before, talking about zoning factors to consider, but I'd like you to take one and hand it out. I have one also for Jesse. And the only thing that I'm concerned about in the staff report is that it seems like the concentration is solely upon the long-range plan, the 2030 plan, when in fact, I think it's always compatibility with adjoining neighbors and neighboring property is the number one consideration, and certainly consideration of the long-range plan is important. It's one of 12 factors that should be looked at, that the courts have allowed or the statutes talk about looking at. But should not be, in my opinion, the only factor. And as I have stated for 12 years at least now, a land use plan is meant to be just that, a plan. It is not to be legally binding on the city. It is a guide, and certainly it's something to be taken into consideration. I want you to do that, but I think you need to look at many, many different things about that, some of which are somewhat covered in the 2030 plan, but not all of them. And I do think that the proposal here is a downzoning proposal, and it seems like the major opposition from the planning department is simply to require a form-based zoning here as opposed to a traditional zoning. And that gives me some concerns because long-range plans change. I was on the city council back in the 90s, and we adopted the first long-range plan, the 2010 plan. And within about 3 or 4 years, we decided that wasn't good enough, so we did a new plan, and 2020 plan. And there was minor changes on that. And then not too long after I became city attorney in 2001, we did the 2025 plan. And now we have the 2030 plan. Now, plans change. I mean, that's the whole thing about them. That's why we keep having new plans every 5 years. It sounds like it's such a long-range plan. Well, how could we ever think about not following it exactly for rezoning? But plans do change. And there are general guidelines for you and general indications of what maybe the hopes for the future are. But they should not be the only considerations. The primary consideration is the compatibility. Highest and best use of the land is certainly a consideration, not the overriding consideration. Good civic design, safety, traffic congestion, all that stuff should be looked at. But anyway, I encourage you to look at all of the factors that the statutes and the courts have suggested that you look at, and including the 2030 plan and its objectives, before you make your recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Commissioners, anybody? All right, well, I'm going to make a few comments then. Question for staff. Jesse, the city staff does not support C2 zoning. Would the city staff support UT zoning there, urban thoroughfare?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think this may also answer City Attorney's comment about staff's potential recommendation on the zoning district. We have no other recommendation or request that's been put in front of the city staff and that we responded to the Planning Commission is, do we support C2 zoning? And we do not. We were not asked about our opinion on other zoning districts.
Yeah, I'm asking you, what's your opinion on the UT zoning?
Yeah, at this
Not
point,
a question.
Yeah, that's not the question. The question is, they're proposing a C2 zoning district, and in this case, we don't feel C2 is appropriate here. If they came back with urban thoroughfare zoning, we could look at it and evaluate it.
Okay, all right, well, I'll make my comments towards it then. In UT zoning, the uses are very, very similar to C2 zoning. The only difference is where the building is placed and how the parking lot lays out and all that. And I agree with the city attorney 100% that, you know, while I'm a big supporter of the City Plan 2030 objectives, I still don't believe that it applies to absolutely every single parcel in the city. I think you got to have, I think there has to be balance there. And I was listening to the people that were commenting, and even those that were against it seemed like they were a little bit on the fence. And you get some benefits and you trade off some things, Mr. Kaminsky. And so anyway, and then a lot of people like it. And that is a rebirthing part of the city, and I believe that they do deserve new services. They are close to the trail. Somebody had actually taken the words out of my mouth. I think Mr. Rash did that, and that is, be great to be able to bike to a place to buy some groceries or what have you, whether the building's up next to the street or not. And so I think it's fitting for the neighborhood. I think it'd be a good addition to the neighborhood, a convenience, and is needed in that area, and I'll support the rezoning 100%.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Winston.
Question is about, I guess this is a question for the applicant. Since you brought it up about it'd be difficult to develop this or more expensive to develop this piece of property if it was a different zoning than C2 because it's got a 20% slope to it, that indicates to me that the uphill side of this is going to be a huge retaining wall. And I was wondering if you could respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. The Hannahs aren't going to build anything, right? And so I cannot respond to that. If the zoning is approved, then we'll go through the city's procedures and steps. But we believe that this is at a very appropriate use and zoning for this area because of everybody that's been telling us that, boy, they'd like to have a grocery store there. Now, that's what Mr. Hanna is proposing because he has a developer proposing to do that. So, once we get into those site things, Mr. Winston, I'm sure that's all going to be nailed down.
I only bring it up because you bring it up, but I think that is something to recognize, that when you've got a large hillside and you're making a single use out of the piece of land, that there will at some point be something that will make that transition from the slope down to a flat area, because you just cannot put a large building on a huge slope without being very creative. No, I'm not saying, but usually you want to back trucks up to this thing, and it's not on the second story. And so I think we have to recognize that part of zoning C2 is tacitly giving our approval to there being a transition form at some point, which is generally not walkable. So I just want to put that out as part of the compatibility with adjacent zones, and good civic design and efficiency. A few of them on here that I think points to that. Also, we've heard from one member of the community quite often about these areas and large parking lots and water runoff, and it seems to continue to be a problem. And he's not here tonight, so I just want to recognize the ghost of Mr. Shepherd. You know what he'd say.
Thank you, Mr. Winston.
I'll cede the floor.
Mr. Shepherd. Okay. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Autry.
This is, it's very confusing. I know a lot of the homeowners, like Mr. Kaminsky, I think summed it up best. He kind of sees both the positive and what he may have to give up. This is a very transitional zone. It's, I-1 zone now, downtown General Main Street. You're on the edge of the south edge of the historic district. You're transitioning from downtown through a neighborhood area. You got Hill Street on one side, Government to the east, and those are going to become very heavily trafficked thoroughfares to get to this potential development, whatever it may be, although we know what it's going to be. I think this is a very traditional part of Fayetteville. The south entrance to Fayetteville used to look pretty ragged when you came in, but over the last 10 or 15 years, it's really, the look there, the entrance into the city is greatly improved. I know it's maybe a possible good impact for folks in the area to have more convenient shopping. There is a super center 2 miles away. I don't know if people actually drive from South Fayetteville to Joy Street to shop, but they may. That would be bypassing one super center to go to another. I do understand and I also agree with our city attorney's thought process on this, but can't be in support of it at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll dive in. I know I'm not a big fan of the C2 zoning in this area. I mean, we've got C2 zoning all up and down this line, and I think staff made that comment, and you can see it in our current zoning map. So I think you could argue probably both ways as far as compatibility with adjacent zoning, but I have to admit, I'm not a fan of the C2 zoning. We've talked about it on other parcels on Martin Luther King, and I haven't supported on those other ones either. So I will admit I'm a big fan of our form-based zoning because it does allow a lot of the uses that the commercial zoning allows, but it gives an opportunity to provide some of the design principles that all of the city has agreed upon at one point or another. That they want to see come to the city of Fayetteville. So to me, the form-based zoning is a good middle ground because we provide the commercial needs of most people want to put out there, but yeah, we try to look at some of the aesthetics for the city of Fayetteville. So I don't think the C2 would certainly, in my opinion, not meet the 2030 plan objectives. And I guess you could argue both ways whether this is an appropriate and best use of the land, but I certainly don't think industrial is in its current state where we are now, but I'm just not supportive of C2 zoning in this spot.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bunch.
I'm not in support of the C2 zoning either, because I know everybody knows what we're talking about that might go in there. And a grocery store would be a nice thing to have. And you know, lots of people that have commented have said, well, you know, it would be nice to have a grocery store we could go to, but I don't like the way that certain stores look and so on. But when I look at the C2 zoning, let's say a grocery store didn't go in there. There's a lot of other things that could go in there, and I'd kind of like to see a transition from the industrial to a different type of zoning that might allow a grocery store or something that's more compatible with the neighborhood, but not allow some of the other things that could be in with C2 zoning. So I'm not in support of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hodges.
So I'm going to fall in line with Commissioner Bunch, Commissioner Cook. That's the concern that I have. Traffic, really, number one. I don't know how many people drive through that area that are here tonight. I'm sure a considerable amount, but you know, the streets that run back behind that area, they don't support any kind of traffic load outside of just residential travel. You know, I could see a form-based zone like urban thoroughfare, something like that. I think that would kind of give the neighborhood some kind of guarantee that there would be some type of development that would be compatible with the surrounding area as opposed to a C2. The C2's, in my mind, just a little too heavy for that area. And that's, you know, just at this time, I don't think I could support it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Winston.
I want to make a motion, but I first just want to say, once again, this is the Mill District. And the Mill District to me is young. It's just getting started. And I want to encourage the Mill District to grow and expand and become a destination. And so I'm going to move to forward to City Council with a recommendation of denial, rezone 14-4850.
Second.
Okay, you just need to vote against it, and then if they want to go to the city council, they will appeal. So it's either, you probably ought to be a motion in favor and have it lose.
Okay.
And then if they want to, they can appeal to city council.
That's always confusing to everybody, but we'll do it that way. Motion to approve rezone 14-4850, and I'll be voting against that.
Wow. Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Cook. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins,
No.
Anchul,
No?
Cook,
No.
Winston,
No.
Bunch,
No.
Noble,
No.
Selby,
No.
Autry.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Wow. Anyway, okay.
That's the last item, I think, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
That's the last item on the agenda.
Yeah, actually, the last thing is do we have subdivision committee coming up?
Yes. Thank
Mr.
you.
Cook
We have
is
subdivision
set
committee
in.
this Thursday.
Mr. Cook's in for me.
Cook's in for Autry, so it'll be Cook, Winston, who's the third?
Which team is it?
Oh, yeah, Chester.
Chester, okay.
Team 2, I guess? it
Chester
is?
will be there.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we are adjourned.